"We understand your concern, sir," the representative said, "but the redirection of water is standard procedure and complies with all local regulations. Some flooding is an unfortunate consequence." Unfortunate consequence? My basement, the place where I kept irreplaceable family heirlooms, hundreds of old photographs, and boxes of memories, was now submerged. Their words felt like a slap to the face. I hung up and stared at the cascading water, helplessness turning into fury. The water was relentless, advancing inch by inch, turning decades of collected items into soggy ruins. My books, carefully stacked, were floating like tiny islands in a sea of destruction. Boxes that contained old photographs, letters, and childhood mementos were soaking through, the paper curling and ink smearing beyond recognition. I tried to salvage what I could, grabbing boxes and dragging them to higher ground, but the water was faster, more insidious than I anticipated. As I moved through the basement, I began to notice the patterns of the flooding. The water was deepest along the eastern wall, right where the HOA's new drainage pipe emptied. It wasn't just a coincidence, the evidence was staring me in the face. I knelt beside the wall, pressing my hand against the slick concrete, and felt the chill seep into my bones. My home, my sanctuary, had been violated. The thought knotted me, a mix of disbelief and simmering anger. How could a community association, one that claimed to care for homeowners, be so indifferent to the destruction of someone's property? The rain continued without mercy, drumming against the roof and creating a background soundtrack to the chaos in my basement. I paced, thinking frantically, trying to figure out my next steps. Calling the HOA again seemed pointless, given their earlier response. Calling a plumber or contractor might help stem the damage, but it wouldn't address the source, the misdirected floodwaters, the negligence that had caused this catastrophe. I needed proof, documentation, anything that would hold the HOA accountable. But for now, my priority was containment. I grabbed buckets and towels, moving them as best I could to slow the advance of water, but deep down I knew it was a losing battle. As night fell, the storm showed no signs of relenting. The basement light flickered, shadows dancing across the rising water. I stood there, drenched and exhausted, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The realization hit hard, this wasn't just a minor inconvenience. My possessions, my memories, and the sense of safety in my own home had been threatened, and no one seemed willing to take responsibility. And in that moment, a seed of determination was planted. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let the HOA's negligence ruin my life without consequence. Something had to be done. I would document, fight, and ensure that justice was served. The water might have invaded my basement tonight, but I knew it wouldn't win. Not if I could help it. By the time the storm subsided, I was soaked, exhausted, and more determined than ever. The basement was a mess, but in the chaos, a plan began to form. I would make the HOA face the consequences of their actions. I would turn this disaster into accountability. And most importantly, I would protect my home, no matter what it took. The aftermath of the flood left me exhausted, both physically and emotionally. My basement, once a place of storage and quiet refuge, had been transformed into a chaotic mess of water, mud, and ruined possessions. Yet, amidst the despair, I recognized a clear path forward. I had to prove that the HOA's negligence was the cause and hold them accountable. It wasn't enough to simply clean up, I needed evidence, professional opinions, and a plan that would compel them to take responsibility. The fight was just beginning. I started by documenting everything meticulously. Each item in my basement that had been damaged was photographed from multiple angles, captions noting the extent of the damage and its location relative to the flooding. I even took videos of the water as it poured in, capturing the relentless flow directly from the HOA's drainage pipe. The more I recorded, the clearer it became, this wasn't an accident. The redirection of water had been deliberate, designed to protect other areas of the neighborhood at my expense. Every image, every frame of video, told a story the HOA couldn't ignore. Next, I sought the guidance of drainage engineers. I needed experts who could analyze the HOA's system and quantify its impact on my property. The first engineer arrived with a clipboard, a small measuring device, and an air of quiet professionalism. He knelt by the affected areas, taking notes and measuring water levels. As he studied the drainage layout, his expression shifted from neutral curiosity to concern. He explained that the pipes were improperly angled, effectively channeling water toward my foundation rather than dispersing it safely. His words validated my suspicions. This was not a minor oversight, it was a structural miscalculation with real consequences. Over the next several weeks, I met with additional engineers and contractors, each providing estimates and solutions. The most effective approach involved installing a comprehensive drainage system designed specifically to handle both the redirected HOA water and future storm runoff. The proposed system included a network of reinforced pipes, sump pumps, and retaining channels capable of handling extreme rainfall. The price tag was daunting, $90,000, but it was a necessary investment. Not only would it protect my basement, but it would also prevent the HOA from continuing to jeopardize my property. Armed with documentation, expert opinions, and cost estimates, I requested a formal meeting with the HOA board. The day of the meeting arrived, and I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. Walking into the conference room, I noticed the casual demeanor of the board members. Some were scrolling on phones, others whispered among themselves, clearly underestimating the seriousness of the situation. I refused to be intimidated. I began my presentation by showing photos of the flood damage, carefully explaining how each section of the basement had been affected. Then I played the videos, demonstrating how the water from their redirected drainage system poured directly into my yard. The room grew silent as they watched, the weight of undeniable evidence settling over them. I then introduced the engineers' reports, each outlining in technical detail how the misdirected water caused structural damage and how the proposed drainage system would solve the problem. At first, there was resistance. One board member argued that the flooding was merely a result of an unusually heavy storm. Another suggested that my requests for a $90,000 system were excessive and unnecessary. I countered calmly but firmly, pointing out that the engineer's analysis showed the flooding was entirely avoidable and that any cheaper solutions would not adequately protect my property or address liability concerns. I highlighted the legal and financial risks the HOA faced if the problem persisted, potential lawsuits, insurance claims, and reputational damage. My argument wasn't just about my basement, it was about accountability and responsible governance. During the discussion, I noticed a subtle shift in their attitude. The more I presented concrete evidence, the more difficult it became for them to dismiss the situation. The engineer I had brought to the meeting explained the technical specifications, demonstrating exactly how the new system would divert water safely and prevent future issues. The cost, once a point of contention, began to seem like a reasonable investment compared to the potential legal and repair costs they could face otherwise. Negotiations were tense and protracted. I listened as they debated among themselves, weighing liability against budget concerns. I maintained my composure, knowing that any sign of frustration could weaken my position. I emphasized that my goal was not punishment but prevention, that the system would protect both my property and the broader community. Slowly, the board members began to acknowledge the truth of the situation. They could no longer argue against the evidence, and the engineer's professional assessments carried weight that could not be ignored. After hours of discussion, a tentative agreement was reached. The HOA would approve the installation of the $90,000 drainage system, covering the full cost. The relief I felt was immediate, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the real work was only beginning. Approval was one thing, implementation was another. I spent the following weeks coordinating with contractors, ensuring that every detail was addressed: the placement of pipes, the capacity of some pumps, the alignment with the HOA's existing drainage. Every element had to be precise to prevent future disasters. During the installation process, I observed the workers closely, ensuring that the project followed the engineer's specifications exactly. Trenches were dug, pipes laid, pumps installed, and channels reinforced. Each step of the process was a testament to careful planning and the power of persistence. The new system transformed the basement from a site of devastation into a fortress against flooding, a safeguard engineered to withstand even the heaviest storms. By the time the work was completed, a sense of vindication had settled over me. The HOA had finally acknowledged their mistake, not through empty words but through action. The $90,000 system stood as proof that accountability could not be ignored and that with diligence, persistence, and expert guidance, even powerful organizations could be compelled to act responsibly. I had turned a devastating flood into a victory, ensuring that my property, and my memories, would never again be at the mercy of someone else's negligence. The process had been grueling, filled with frustration, legal threats, and the emotional toll of seeing my home flooded. But it had also been empowering. I had learned the importance of meticulous documentation, of expert advice, and of standing firm in the face of institutional resistance. The experience reinforced a lesson I would carry forever. In moments of crisis, preparation, determination, and unwavering resolve could turn even the worst circumstances into a triumph. The day the drainage system installation began, I arrived at my property early, even before the first trucks pulled up. The rain had returned, though lighter than the storm that had caused so much damage before, almost as if the universe wanted to test the new system from the very start. I stood on the lawn, watching the workers unload equipment and materials, their movements precise and methodical. Pipes, pumps, and reinforced channels were laid out in neat rows, ready to transform the chaotic aftermath of the flood into a permanent solution. I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just a construction project, it was the culmination of months of effort, persistence, and evidence-backed confrontation. As the workers began digging trenches along the eastern edge of my property, where the HOA's redirected water had once poured unchecked, I followed every step closely. The sound of shovels striking earth was accompanied by the occasional hiss of water being rerouted into temporary channels. Watching the progress, I realized how crucial each measurement was. Even a slight misalignment could render the system ineffective. I consulted constantly with the lead engineer, verifying slopes, pipe diameters, and pump capacities. Every adjustment was documented, every decision calculated. The magnitude of what we were creating became more tangible with each passing hour. During the installation, I took a moment to reflect on the months that had led to this point. The flood itself, the damage to my basement, the countless calls and meetings with the HOA, the engineer's reports, and the legal negotiations, all of it had been grueling. There had been moments when I questioned whether the effort was worth it, whether I was fighting a losing battle against an institution that seemed determined to protect itself at my expense. But seeing the pipes being laid, the channels taking shape, the pumps being installed, I felt an overwhelming sense of validation. I had taken control of a situation that had initially seemed hopeless. By mid-morning, the main infrastructure was in place. Trenches had been dug, large pipes were connected, and the sump pumps were installed in their designated pits. The workers began covering the channels with reinforced mesh and concrete, ensuring stability and durability. I watched closely, taking notes and asking questions, determined that no shortcuts would be taken. The system needed to work perfectly. It was more than protection for my home, it was a statement that negligence would not go unchallenged. The HOA representatives had been invited to observe the installation, and by late afternoon, they arrived. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to mild apprehension as I walked them through the site, explaining how the system functioned. I could sense their discomfort as I pointed to the area where their previous misdirected drainage had caused the flood, showing how the new system would intercept and safely divert water away from my property. Their silence was telling. The evidence of their oversight, now visual and tangible, was impossible to dispute. I remained calm, presenting facts and explanations without aggression, knowing that the work itself would speak louder than any argument. As the rain began to intensify, we conducted preliminary tests. Water was released through temporary channels to simulate a storm, and the system performed flawlessly. The pipes carried the water efficiently to a retention area, the sump pumps activated as expected, and no water reached my basement. Standing there, soaked but exhilarated, I felt a surge of triumph. Months of planning, meetings, documentation, and persistence had culminated in this moment. My home was finally secure, protected against the very threat that had once devastated it. Over the next few days, the finishing touches were completed. Trenches were filled, landscaping restored, and the surface area smoothed to blend seamlessly with the rest of the yard. The engineers conducted final inspections, confirming that everything met specifications and that the system was fully operational. I walked through the property, examining every detail, satisfied that nothing had been overlooked. The basement remained dry, the pumps functional, and the channels secure. The relief was tangible, a weight lifted after months of stress and uncertainty. The completion of the system also marked a turning point in my relationship with the HOA. While tension remained, the installation served as a visible reminder of accountability. The board members could no longer dismiss the damage, the negligence, or the costs of their mismanagement. I had transformed a disastrous situation into a tangible solution, one that protected not only my property but also reinforced the expectation that the HOA had a duty to act responsibly. The $90,000 system was more than an investment in drainage, it was an investment in fairness, oversight, and justice. A week later, during another heavy rainstorm, I watched from the basement window as water flowed across the yard. Unlike before, it did not seep into my home. The new drainage system handled the flow effortlessly, diverting water safely through the pipes and channels. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of security. My basement remained dry, my possessions safe, and my home once again felt like a sanctuary. I realized that the months of effort, the meticulous documentation, the consultations with engineers, and the persistence in dealing with the HOA had paid off. I had turned chaos into control, vulnerability into protection. Reflecting on the entire experience, I recognized how much I had learned. I had discovered the importance of standing firm, of gathering irrefutable evidence, and of approaching even powerful institutions with a combination of knowledge and calm resolve. The flood had been devastating, but it had also been a catalyst, forcing me to assert my rights, demand accountability, and ensure the safety of my home. I felt a sense of empowerment that went beyond the technical achievement of installing a drainage system. I had reclaimed control over my property and demonstrated that negligence, no matter how institutional, could be challenged successfully. As the days passed, the system continued to perform flawlessly. I maintained regular inspection.